Well, here we are again to your podcast number 2. Hopefully you survived 1-1, which was a pretty short one, and gives you an idea of how you're going to be taking notes throughout the year. Section 1-2, How Scientists Work, basically deals with the steps to the scientific method. And as far as definitions go, here is your very important definition. What is the scientific method? So, the scientific method is, and you'll want to make sure that you write this down and remember this, involves a series of steps that are used to investigate a natural occurrence. So, let us take a closer look at the steps and the terminology you will need to understand before starting a science experiment. These are going to be the 7 steps to the scientific method. So the first one that you see is we're going to state the problem or ask a question. So this is number 1. Number 2, we need to make observations. Remember, we make observations using our senses, our sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. And then we might want to do just a little bit of research when it comes to our particular topic. Next, we formulate a hypothesis, and in the podcast that you watched yesterday, hypothesis is an educated guess. Next thing we're going to do is do an experiment, and there's a specific type of experiment. It's called a controlled experiment, but we'll talk more about that in future slides. Then we're going to collect and analyze results. Remember, another name for results is going to be data. Finally, at the end, and data in science can be maybe demonstrated in a chart, a graph, or a table. A lot of times it involves lots of numbers or percents, and so that's how we show data. Finally, we're going to draw a conclusion, and then we're going to communicate these results or share them with the rest of the world. So those are the 7 steps to the scientific method, and we're going to go through them individually. Designing an experiment. So, once again, we start by developing a question or a problem that can be solved through experimentation. Then we make observations. Remember, we make observations by using our senses, and we could even research the topic that we're going to do the experiment on. Finally, we form a hypothesis. Remember, a hypothesis is an educated guess. The key here is that it's a statement that can be tested. So it has to be able to be tested. And finally, here would be a good example of a hypothesis. Maple leaves change color due to a change in temperature. It's something that we can actually test by seeing how as the temperature decreases, the leaves on the trees change from maybe green to red to orange to yellow. All right, here's the key when it comes to an experiment. We need it to be what's called a controlled experiment. So a controlled experiment is a planned procedure to test the hypothesis. And sometimes a hypothesis is an if-then statement. So what are we testing? The thing that we're testing in our particular experiment is called variables. And variables are factors in an experiment that can change. This is the key. They can change. So here under this bullet are examples of variables. Equipment used, types of material, amount of material, temperature, light, time. All of these are, in this bullet, all of them are variables. So here is your definition right here of a controlled experiment. A test of the effect of one, and this is one thing that you always have to remember, just one variable, by changing just that one variable and keeping all other variables the same. So this is the key. In a controlled experiment, we're just changing one variable. The two main types of variables are what's called the independent or manipulated variable, and that's the factor that we deliberately change. Oops, got to go back. That we deliberately change. The dependent variable, or sometimes called the responding variable, is the factor that may change as a result of changes made in the independent variable. So, let's go back here again. So the independent variable is deliberately changed. The dependent variable is the factor that may change as a result of the independent variable. So these are very important that you know the difference between these two. Next one is your control group. The control group is the group that is exposed to the same conditions as the experimental group except for the variable that is tested. So, in a scientific experiment, the control is the group that serves as the standard of comparison. The control, meaning staying the same, group may be a no treatment or the experimenter selected group. And here's the key. All experiments have to have a control. Sometimes you'll hear where they'll say, in a medical, we're testing a specific pill and some people are given a sugar pill and some people are given the real medication, but the people don't know which medication or whether they're getting the medication or the sugar pill. The people that don't get anything are the control group. That means that everything stays the same. The people that get the pill are the ones that they're going to see if there's going to be any reaction to that particular type of drug. Constants. The constants in the experiment, and here's another key word, are all the factors that the experimenter attempts to keep the same. So constant, basically it's the same as you would think of it, staying the same. All other factors are kept the same so that any observed changes in the experiment can be attributed. Now this word is a big word. Attributed means due to the variable. Okay. Recording and analyzing the results. So we have now gone through our entire experiment and now we've take these results and now we have to look at the results to see exactly what our conclusion is going to be. So data today is recorded on a computer. And that's when you're doing large experiments. In class, we're going to record the data by hand. Then we look at all the data and then we draw a conclusion. Data is used to evaluate our hypothesis and draw a conclusion. And finally, we're then going to publish and possibly repeat our experiment. They repeat experiments over and over again in hopes to get similar results each time. Other scientists also are testing other places around the world, and they might look at one person's experiment to see if they got the same results. Experiments can then be published in a scientific journal for others to read, and experiments are repeated by others to make sure that the data is not flawed. Finally, when experiments are not possible, well, ethical considerations are a key. And ethical considerations would mean that we don't test certain things on subjects that don't want to have the test done on them. And we have to be doing it in a good manner, whereas we're not hurting the subject that we're testing. For example, determine the effects on people of a chemical suspected of causing cancer. That's not something, we have to think about those people when we're doing a specific type of experiment. In field studies, such as animals in the wild, researchers try not to disturb the natural systems when observing. We want the animals to act normal. So we don't want to go out there and wave our arms and go, here we are, look at us, whoo-hoo, come and see us. No, we want the animals to act normal so we can see what their behavior is like out in the wild. And finally, scientists choose volunteers, and that's going to be the key here, is scientists choosing volunteers. A lot of times, if you're listening to the radio, you'll say, or sometimes you can even read in the paper, it says Covance is looking for people who are willing to perform a specific experiment if you are the ages of 18, are a non-smoker, and then it gives some other characteristics. Maybe you have asthma. Please call this number. You might be able to make money as being part of a study. So people can volunteer to be parts of studies. A lot of times people who have cancer might volunteer to be part of testing for a specific drug if the drug that they're using isn't working. Our last vocabulary word, which is key, is a theory. And I know that you've heard this word before. A theory is a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations. So this is the big picture, the huge picture. Yet, no theory is considered absolute truth, which means science is ongoing. Science is always changing. Scientists always want or look for some new answers. So a theory may be revised or even replaced if they can come up with some new evidence through experimentation. So science is characterized by both continuity, and the meaning of continuity means same. So continuity means science can stay the same, or it can also change. That ends podcast 1-2.